So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome all of our guests as well as our panelists who are joining us from the Bay Area, New York, Jerusalem, and maybe many other locations. My name is Tanya Shadoan, and I'm the Senior Director of Impact Investing and Philanthropy Operations here at the Federation. I'm in my third year with the Federation after having spent more than 2 decades in the banking world. And I'm so thrilled, both personally and professionally, to be leading our efforts in the impact investing space, starting with our nearly $6 million recoverable grant to Hebrew Free Loan for COVID relief last April. Today, we will be introducing you to Ogen, Israel's first nonprofit social bank, and one of our newest impact investing opportunities for Federation Philanthropic Capital. First, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. We have Greg Meechan, a member of Federation's Investment Committee, who has more than 20 years of experience in impact investing and social entrepreneurship. He's currently director of Kenyarth, a single-family office committed to investment activity that advances a more just and equitable society. From Ogen, we're delighted to welcome Sagi Balashi, CEO of the Ogen Group, which is comprised of 5 nonprofit organizations dedicated to increasing affordable credit and financial empowerment in Israel, and also David Angel, Vice President of Partnerships at Ogen, also responsible for fundraising, donor and investor relations, and communications. And we also are delighted to welcome Bob Gottesman, Executive Chairman at First Manhattan, board member of American Friends of Ogen, and an active philanthropist engaged in Jewish causes both domestically and in Israel. We'll start this morning with Greg, who will speak about our recent launch of impact investing at the Federation and why we're so excited to be partnering with Ogen. Next, you'll hear from David, who will give you an overview of Ogen and the Israel Social Loan Fund. And then Bob will share his perspective on his own personal interest in Ogen as a philanthropist, investor, and board member. I'll follow that up with some information about how you too can support Ogen by investing DAF capital, and then we'll open it up for questions. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Greg.
Great, thanks, Tanya. Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Meechan. As Tanya mentioned, my day job is serving as the director of Kenyarth. Kenyarth's the family office of Diane Eisenberg. And I serve as director of the office as well as board member of the Eisenberg Family Charitable Foundation. And collectively between the family office and the foundation, we are one of the largest and few family investment firms focused exclusively on impact investing. It's all we do with 100% of our asset base. And so we are big advocates and big champions for the impact investing movement. And because of that, I've just been absolutely delighted to be able to put my day job, put my expertise to work in the Jewish community as the lay leader of the Federation's impact investing efforts. And it's been just a real pleasure to work with Tanya and Masha and the entire team to launch this work and then to begin to get to know more of our donor community through forums like this. So it's great to be here. I was asked to kick this off and to talk quickly about 2 questions: why impact investing and why Ogen. So first, this question of why impact investing, and I think the answer to this question is that impact investing itself is the answer to 2 of your most critical questions as a philanthropist. The first question is, how do I make sure that the money I hope to use in the future is invested in a way while I'm waiting to use it that is aligned with my values and is not working against my philanthropic priorities? And the second question that one trying to ask as a philanthropist is, once I get around to deploying that capital, once I'm dispersing money that is intended to produce impact in the community, how do I use all available tools, grants, recoverable grants, loans, advocacy, media efforts, all to further my philanthropic mission? And I think impact investing is many things And if you want to learn all the things it is, a short plug is that next month I'm going to be hosting a Impact Investing 101 session where we can get into many of these details. But while it's many things, it is the simple answer for how you can do more with all of your capital. And I would say there are few moments in our lifetimes when doing more with our philanthropic money is more important. When I talk about this concept of using all of your assets, I'm really talking about this transition that we've highlighted on the slide that's in front of everyone. You know, we used to live in the world that's on the left-hand side of this chart, where foundations and individuals invested 95% of their assets in completely conventional ways. Even if those investments conflicted with their values or their mission, they made those investments to produce returns so that they could give away a fraction, say 5% of those assets. Now, it's a perfectly fine model and it's been working. And the 5% that's going out into the world is doing great good. So we can't argue um, with that sort of historical model. But what if we could unlock more of that capital? What if we could unlock all of that capital? People spend lots of time contemplating increasing disbursements from 5% to 6% or 5% to 7%. But what if we could ensure that 100% of the capital that you have allocated in your DAF to philanthropic objectives is, at worst, not working against your values, and at best, directly furthering your mission in recyclable ways and working really hand in hand with your traditional grant activity as complementary tools. And so that right-hand side of the slide is where we're going. You know, this is the future we're trying to create for all of our donor advisors. This is what we plan to bring you in the coming months and years. Opportunities to invest responsibly in things like ESG or Jewish screen public equities and fixed income products, as well as high impact loans and other investments that are directly supporting your philanthropic objectives. So it's going to be impact investing that directly supports both investing and deploying capital in a dynamic way, in an integrated way, and most importantly, in a way that increases impact for the communities that we all want to serve. That's my quick take on why impact investing. So why Ogen? David and Bob are going to tell you a lot more about Ogen today. So I'm not going to steal their thunder, but what I will say is that as an impact investor who has, spent the last 8 years doing, well over 150 transactions, finding high impact organizations that serve vulnerable low income communities, that have demonstrated track records, the right management teams, the right mix of grant support and earned revenues, that have all the things that you need to make for a good impact investment. It's hard. It's hard to find these gems in the US or the UK and markets where the idea of impact investing has been around for a while. And it's even harder in Israel, where the impact sector, except for technology sectors like clean tech and biotech, the impact sector, particularly in the financial services arena, is very nascent. And I think Ogen is really an organization that checks all of those boxes that one wants to see. Finally, I'll say that it follows on the heels of our ongoing support of CDFIs that hopefully all of you have heard about, community development finance institutions in the US. These are financial intermediaries that are serving places and populations that the conventional banking system has abandoned. And we've gotten very comfortable with this model in the US, and Ogen is really replicating this kind of model in Israel, working with really a broad, diverse, underserved segment of the Israeli population. They're a partner with a really proven lending track record, and they're a partner who has worked really well with foreign investors as well, like us. So with that, I am really delighted to hand the virtual mic over to David to tell you more about Ogen.
Thank you very much, Greg, and I extend thanks on behalf of Ogen to you and to Tanya and to Masha and to the entire team. It is really, really inspiring and wonderful to see how Federation is plunging itself into this world of impact investing in such a considered and thoughtful way, and including Israel as part of that, alongside those local projects in the Bay Area. It's really, really wonderful. So I'll tell you a little bit about Ogen, just in the few minutes I have. Ogen is a group of 5 nonprofit organizations, as you can see. And on the next slide in a moment, we'll kind of get to that. But broadly speaking, Ogen breaks down into 2 divisions, which are lending on the one side, and in parallel alongside the lending, coaching, financial coaching and mentoring, to make sure that the people who get the loans and that the loans are effective and that they have the impact that we want. We're not a new organization. We've been around for 30 years. And the vision that really unites all of these activities and pulls everything together, all of these different strands of our activity, is to close socioeconomic gaps, to help people who are unserved or underserved or excluded by the commercial financial system. So as you can see, we've been around for a long time, albeit the fund, the product that we're about to talk about is newer, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But what it means is we have a really long-standing track record. We know how to do this. We know what we're doing. We have made upwards of 66,000 loans. We've lent, here it's written as $360 million, but that number is growing all the time. So we have a very, very, very deep organizational history on how to lend successfully to low-income communities, how to assess risk, how to give out the money, and how to get the money back. That's our absolute core capability as an organization, and we've been doing it for decades. And as you can see in that second bullet in the middle column, with very low loss rates, under 1%. So you might think that we're lending to people who are high risk, but in fact, the beauty of Ogen is that while we are lending to people who are perceived as high risk and who are underserved by the commercial lenders, what the history really shows and plays out in a very, very powerful way is that these people repay their loans. The low-income households that we lend to, the small businesses that we lend to, the non-profits that we lend to, they honor their loans, they honor their debts, and they repay. And that's really at the core of our mission. What you can see on the right-hand side is that as much as I say we're a long-standing organization, COVID has been a period of exponential growth. So just in the last year, we lent $50 million in total, and of that, 30 million in the structure that we're about to talk about. So if we jump along, the blue box is what we're talking about. If anyone wants to, I would be more than happy afterwards to kind of go deeper on all of these different things. As I said, there is lending, there is coaching, and the way that these different activities come together, the synergies between the groups. I would be only too delighted to talk about how all of these things work, how all of these things are funded from a philanthropic perspective. But within the framework of this conversation that we're having right now, we're talking about that. It might be blue, it might be purple. I am chronically genetically colorblind. It's either blue or purple, I'm confident of that. But it's the Israel Social Loan Fund, which was launched just 1 year ago. It launched on January the 1st, 2020. Little did we know at the time, we don't have prophecy, and little did we know at the time when we launched this thing that just 2-3 months afterwards, the pandemic would rear its ugly head and would really push this fund right to the forefront of the ability of the communities that we serve to sustain themselves during the tumultuous events of the last year. So as distinct from everything else you can see on the page, as distinct from all of our historic activities, all of which have been funded by grants, by donations, the Social Loan Fund, as you'll see momentarily, is funded by a hybrid, a combination of some grants alongside the impact loans that we're going to talk about. But before we dive into the actual mechanics of the loans, we should talk about the two communities that we serve, that we serve in this context, which is small businesses and non-profits, which have been among the most acutely damaged by the economic fallout from the pandemic. There is endless evidence to show that effectively the smaller a business is in Israel, the worse affected it has been. So, for instance, the government's official statistics lay out that there are 90,000 small businesses in Israel at immediate risk of closure. But despite that, they have the least access to affordable credit in the commercial banking system. And not only that, these small businesses, because there are so many of them, they are the beating heart of our economy, the beating heart of our workforce. The pizza parlor around the corner, the guy who sells falafel, the electrician who comes to your house, the nail salon, the hairdressers. I say hairdressers because my own hairdresser took a loan today. These are 35% of our GDP. These are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of jobs. And it goes without saying that beyond each of these businesses, there is its own micro, ecosystem. There's the person who owns the business, but then there's his or her children, and the domino effect of the failure of each business or the success of each business, and the way that obviously manifests across social cohesion, across education, across health. It goes without saying that economic vitality and is at the heart of that. In parallel with that small business story, you also have nonprofits. Nonprofits have two main functions. Firstly, they do amazing work. They do amazing work in education, in health, in welfare, in just about every respect of human life. And overwhelmingly, it's the most vulnerable members of society who rely on their services. But not only that, they're also an economic powerhouse as well. There are thousands and thousands of nonprofit organizations. They employ 6% of our entire workforce. They contribute 6% of our GDP. They employ much more than 6% of our workforce, including me. And they have been plunged into deep financial crisis. And we have lent considerably in that area. So just one statistic to kind of drive that point home. 80% of the nonprofits in Israel have reported on reduced income. At one point during the crisis, 50% of nonprofits in Israel were actually inactive, which is obviously highly problematic. And just as how, for instance, in America, what you have is you have a very sophisticated, very advanced infrastructure for how to lend to these communities. You have the Nonprofit Finance Fund and the Illinois Finance Fund, and there are CDFIs, and there's the credit unions, and there are community banks. And you have such an advanced infrastructure. In Israel, these things don't exist. So that's what the gap that we're filling with these loans that you can see in front of them. I won't simply read to you off the page, but you can see that we're doing these considerable low interest loans. I want to stress that in the Israeli environment, these loans are very much low interest. This is a non-profit, strictly non-profit venture. And these loans are a fraction of what our borrowers would get from the commercial lenders if they would even get approved, which overwhelmingly they would not. And then just a couple of stories. This is Yehudit, who runs a restaurant in Jerusalem. The bread you can see there is the only vegetarian thing on the menu. She, like many restaurants, has been prejudiced against by the banking sector simply because of the sector that she's in. restaurants were seen as high risk, untouchable. She was turned down by a loan with the banks. She came to us, she got a loan, she's repaying it. She's got revenue, even while there were closures and people couldn't go to a restaurant, she was operating. So that's Yehudit. If we do just the next slide, and then after I finish, I know that the Federation staff are going to touch upon the actual mechanics of how this works. From a philanthropic perspective and from a donor perspective, and we can answer any questions at the end if Federation's own staff leave anything unanswered. The last one, just to reference, is this is a drug and alcohol addiction rehabilitation center in Israel's north, and unusually for a non-profit, it does not receive a single donation or a single dollar in government money. 100% of the money that this rehabilitation center trades off of comes from the patients, the people going through addiction treatment using its services. So whilst the pandemic was destroying normal life over the course of the last year, this center lost the bulk of its income. It had absolutely no access to not only affordable credit, just credit on any level in order to meet its cash flow challenges. And we made a loan of 150,000 shekels with the help of our supporters, which has kept this very important institution with no other credit outlet going. And they also are repaying their loan because the terms of the loan are such that they're able to afford it, they can repay it slowly, and they can keep going and keep their head above water. So thank you for your time. I am here. We're all here for the questions at the end, and thank you for joining. It's a real pleasure and a delight.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thank you, Greg. So now we'll turn to Bob. Bob, would love to hear more about how you got introduced to Ogen, what compelled you to get involved.
Tanya, thank you, and hi to everybody from New York. So I got involved 20 years ago when it was during one of the intifadas, probably, I don't know which, first, second, probably second. And I wanted to do something that could help right away. And I was looking at organizations that were positioned to do something and not just have money sit someplace and trickle down in a slow way. So actually, it was my uncle that introduced me to what was then the Israel Free Loan Association. And I made a very significant gift at the time. I made $1 million gift. And it was a very big gift for them. But what really cemented my relationship with them was the money was lent out fairly quickly. It was lent out not based on anything that I said lend to these people and not to these people, but it was lent to individuals and it was lent to businesses. And it really had an impact. And what is also something that I'm thinking about is if you think about that $1 million that I contributed in 2001, I bet you that has been lent maybe $7 million. So 7 to 1 in terms of impact. So that was something I like compounding. That's what I do for my business. I'm in the investment business. So that got me very interested. And also just briefly, the founder of Israel Free Loan Association, Eliezer Jaffe, was somebody who became an inspiration. He became my philanthropic rabbi. So his view is life is a loan and interest are the good deeds. And so that really set myself on a philanthropic path. And I really found IFLA to be, or Israel Free Loan Association, to really to embody something that really resonated very deeply with me. So hopefully I gave you a little taste of sort of my involvement from the beginning.
That's terrific. Thank you for that, Bob. It's really been a journey, hasn't it, from 2001 until today. And as David mentioned, with this pandemic, I mean, it couldn't have been a better time to launch with something much bigger and scale it with the help of investors bringing more capital to the table. So on that note, Bob, why is it important for US funders to invest in Ogen's work?
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to say that Ogen is unique in my way of looking at organizations that are based in Israel. The typical model is the money comes from the US and the staff is in Israel. In this case, there is a very active philanthropic effort. In fact, the largest gift that Ogen has gotten during the pandemic, a $30 million gift, came from an Israeli philanthropist. So there really is a sense of partnership that Israeli individuals who can give or foundations that can give are also participating alongside other individuals and foundations outside of Israel. So this I think is a very unique thing, and I believe that Israel is pulling its weight, and America and people in the diaspora, can feel that they have partners. It's not only on their shoulders.
Great. It's really a unique model and a very valuable model to have that kind of partnership. So what keeps you engaged with Ogen's work as we think about where it's come over the past 20, 30 years, and then where we are now with the pandemic and where things are headed with the best of our knowledge and ability to see the future? What are your thoughts about what is keeping you engaged and connected here, Bob?
Well, I think there is a transformation that has happened, as David alluded to. 1 year ago, we started the social bank. 1 year ago, we identified small businesses and not-for-profits as being an area where we wanted to do something that was sustainable. Sustainable being, you have a business model where you can generate through interest. And again, businesses can pay interest. They pay interest to banks, as do nonprofits that need loans. So this is really on commercial terms, but not commercial terms from banks. Banks basically are an oligopoly. They take advantage of the small businesses. So this is an alternative which provides affordable credit to these to this sector. And the need is huge. I mean, I have no idea what the addressable market is, but if Ogen is really just a very small fraction, 1% of the available market, what got me very excited was the opportunity to scale this in some sustainable way. So maybe Ogen could be 5% or 10% of the market and really have a big impact. And what has gotten me very excited, again, I think maybe some of you are in the startup business on your own. This is a startup. There are many exciting things, which this is the first in Israel. There are things about what we're thinking about, including securitizing some of these loans, that takes this part of Ogen and really making it something that is just very exciting to see it, grow and be part of it. And really, I think the potential is great. And again, what I said earlier, some of the Israeli institutions, the financial institutions that are looking in their investment portfolios to be able to invest in things like a collateralized pool of small business loans or loans of not-for-profits that are going to pay back. So these are sort of examples of really what we're able to build and do this, literally over the last year or so. So that's very exciting.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Bob. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our Bay Area-based Federation community?
First of all, I hope we're all able to travel again. That I think I miss being in Israel. I really think that you just have to see this for yourself. And I am in the investment business, so I do care a lot about the people in any organization. And I really would say that the people here are very good. This is a well-run organization. It is a, we've had a founder who basically set a tone. I think the tone really resonated with me. Maybe it can resonate with others. But this is something that you will, I think, have a good experience with. So that's what I wanted to add. And thank you all for being on the call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. Really appreciate your joining us here today and putting in your own endorsement. It means a lot to us and to our community. So thank you for that. All right, I'm going to speak just a few minutes about how this will work, and then we'll move over to questions. So currently, we're aiming to reach $1 million in invested dollars from our philanthropic community. And really, we're looking to take this from our existing funds. So we're not necessarily looking for people to add funds, although that's always welcome. But using existing DAF and supporting foundation capital, we're aiming for $1 million. This will be a 5-year investment from the funds, and it would be in the form of an impact loan to Ogen, as we've been discussing, at a minimum of $1,000. We are very, very interested in seeing this be a collective community effort where people put in what they can and what they choose to, so that we can have the 100,000, 200,000 investments, and we can have the $1,000 investments, and we're all part of doing this together. After the 5-year term, the loans would be repaid back into the DAFs or the supporting foundations, and then that capital can be redeployed for another charitable purpose. This is what Greg was mentioning earlier in terms of recycling of the capital, using it more than one time. So maybe a grant or another impact investment. 5 years from now, who knows what the needs will be and what our community of philanthropists will choose to do with the funds. We currently have $200,000 committed to Ogen, and I'm delighted to recognize some of our fund holders, Dan and Gina Waldman, who you see on the screen here, who have very generously offered to match the next $100,000 invested in Ogen from our Bay Area Federation community. Thank you so much, Dan and Gina, for stepping up here. Would you like to say a couple of words to the community?
I think, Dan, you want to start with what appealed to you?
Well,
Come closer.
my experience with this whole business was in the Peace Corps, 1967, right after the Israel war, actually. I was in India raising chickens, teaching how to raise poultry. So my experience taught me how little access poor people actually have to capital. 99% of the population plus had virtually no access. And to this day, still don't have access to capital. And when I found out, after getting back from the Peace Corps, 10 years later, I think the microloan program started, led by a Pakistani banker, which really gave me a big boost in my belief in this type of loan. And the success of that particular program is just phenomenal, just like Ogen is. And that's why I now enthusiastically support Ogen, and we'll probably do more than we're doing right now. We're just starting out, and we're starting out with a challenge loan, not a challenge grant, but a challenge loan where we ask other people to contribute 100,000 in order for us to match it. And I think it's going to be successful because these kinds of challenges do work, and I urge others to do the same. So I'm very, very enthusiastic about it. These programs do work, and it's particularly good to know that people are paying back their loans, because usually small business people are very responsible and very grateful for this type of loan because they don't have access to other forms of capital.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I founded and run a nonprofit organization. So I totally sympathize with what was said today about the nonprofit. What appealed to me a lot was not only that the loans are small enough that gives a hands up to small business, which having visited Israel so many times, we note that thanks to the little grocery owner and the man who fixes your car and the hairdresser, as you mentioned, it's amazing how much small businesses. I grew up and was born in North Africa, and there was nothing else but small businesses. So even the person who is, fixing your, whatever, whether it's your electricity or plumbing or and what have you. And we also now Israel is become a multicultural, multi-ethnic community. So we have a lot of people who are becoming small businesses, and they should be given an opportunity as well. What really appealed to me is the low overhead. I don't see CEOs being paid huge amounts of money, and that appealed to me. So one question I had was, first, how big or what's the maximum loans you actually give out? And then also, do you reach out to communities that are more like in the Beersheba area or in the desert areas? Because they seem to be isolated, not just economically, but also geographically. And I guess, so if you could touch on that, and if you could give us a little bit more of a sampler of what does mentoring look like? I mean, do you have social workers? Do you have people who are trained who go and sit down? Do they look at the books? Do they guide people? Anything like that would be helpful.
Experienced business people that mentor people. Yes.
And the last thing is, we're thrilled that you've already raised the 200,000, and I would encourage anyone who is in this group or in our federation to also come up with some more funding for the organization. Maybe there is a way we can publicize it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gina and Dan. That was really very, very wonderful to hear your thoughts, your personal stories, and your questions. It's going to kick off our Q&A session. So David, Sagi, who wants to take those questions from Gina?
I think Sagi can speak as our CEO.
Hi everybody, and Dan and Gina, we don't know each other. It's very touching, and I'm really looking forward to fly 15 hours to just meet you guys. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody, Tanya, Greg, Bob, David, for the great presentation. So we have a variety of loans. Our maximum loan is around $70,000-$80,000. Our average loan is around $30,000 or even $25,000 to a small business. And we are limiting ourselves to businesses that are up to their whole annual turnover is up to around $1.5 million, even less than that. Just because we believe we need to focus on really small businesses. What was David? I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate on the other question.
Regions as well in Beersheba and the periphery.
Yeah. So naturally, there are a lot of small businesses in Israel's periphery, and those businesses have less access to credit, and therefore we are always emphasizing working with the Galilee, the Negev, Jerusalem, who became culture with the Arab society in Israel. We are enhancing our work with Ethiopia, the Ethiopian community and general community of immigrants. That's where our focus is. By the way, Ogen was founded 30 years ago in a nutshell to help immigrants. And it grew to be helping all Israelis. but we still always have in our office an Amharic speaking and Russian speaking, French speaking to help all those people. Regarding mentoring, so the Ogen Group has a whole mentoring organization within. We have a community of 900 business mentors from the high-end business community in Israel, helping 900 businesses in every given moment in a really deep process of a 2 years mentoring, helping them to go through the hurdles of starting a business or businesses in need. And it's very effective. Keren Shemesh is the name of the organization that is doing that this mentoring program, and we're very successful in growing this arm during the COVID period. If we would meet this time last year, we were able to work with 400 businesses, and now we are able to work with 900 businesses in every given moment. This is great. And just last thing, something from the Bay Area, we just got an impact loan of $1 million from Google, not the Google in Israel, from Google in your area, and I thought it's something you should know. It happened 2 weeks ago, and we're very excited about it.
Google here.
Yes.
Congratulations on that, Sagi. All right, so I'd like to invite anybody who has a question to put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We have a few questions that have come through already, so we'll start to answer them, but feel free to put any other questions into the Q&A and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. So one question for Bob, who are some of the other funders of American Friends of Ogen?
Bob, you're on mute. Bob, you're on mute.
You know, I would like to ask David to perhaps answer that question. He would know better, but obviously I've been on a little bit of the front lines to ask or solicit for impact loans. But David, why don't you answer?
Certainly. So on this side of things, we have been very fortunate to raise significant contributions from some public foundations and some people who want to be anonymous, and I will of course leave them anonymous. So the Russell Berry Foundation in New Jersey, the Max and Marjorie Fisher Foundation in Detroit, the Lindenbaum family in New York, Google, the Tabasinik family in Miami. All of these people have given generously. I could go on and on, but there are many foundations in California.
Maybe the JCF.
Yes, so that's a perfect reminder. Thank you. This is what the framework we're talking about right now of people using their DAFs. This is actually the second one of those that we're doing. The first people to dive into the water on that were JCF in New York, the New York equivalent of Federation, and 6 funders so far came together, and they have a different model. The minimum is not $1,000; it's $250,000. So we've raised almost $3 million from that New York Jewish Communal Fund community. The Glazer Foundation in Los Angeles, the Gilbert Foundation in Los Angeles, all of these people have contributed generously. PEF in New York, if people know them.
Great, thank you, David. Yeah, it's a great list and clearly a ringing endorsement of the important work that you're doing and people's confidence in your ability to do it well. A few more questions for Ogen. Do you require a loan guarantor?
Sagi.
Yeah, so it depends on what type of loan. We currently have 3 tracks of lending to small businesses, and 4 tracks of lending to nonprofits. So I'll start with the easy question. Nonprofits cannot bring a guarantor, so we don't. And we protect the investors by raising risk mitigation cushion. What is a risk mitigation cushion? It's a traditional donation people give us, but this donation will absorb a potential risk, a potential default. Because we're having those type of risk mitigation cushions, and people that prefer just to give us a donation can give us a risk mitigation cushion instead of an impact loan. That's why we are able to give all nonprofits a loan with no guarantors. Regarding businesses, so for 60% of the businesses, we are able to get a government guarantee. This is something really very new that we got in last September. No nonprofit ever got a government guarantee, but when the government of Israel, the Ministry of Finance, saw in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the COVID crisis, that Ogen is in the front line of this crisis, they just said, we'll give you a government guarantee to help you work with all those businesses. So of course there are requirements, and so we can't use it for all our businesses, but we are using it to around 50%. To those businesses, we take no guarantors. To other businesses, we sometimes take a guarantor if we see during the underwriting process, which is very deep what we do. We sometimes ask for a guarantor. For new businesses, we always ask for a guarantor. If somebody wants to establish a business. During the 30 years of Ogen's existence, we found the guarantor a very effective way of reducing default. But on the other hand, nowadays a guarantor is becoming something that is harder for people to bring in. And so we are kind of trying to raise more risk mitigation cushion and replace the guarantor, the need for a guarantor, with those kind of cushions.
That's great, Sagi, because you're right that a guarantor can be an impediment for some borrowers. If they can't come up with a guarantor, that could block access. So the unique combination of risk mitigation cushions that you described, the government, the philanthropic capital to cover losses is truly game-changing here and enables this to be accessible and affordable to people across the board. Another question, how does a nonprofit like Bait Ham, the addiction program you mentioned before, pay back the loan, given the large overhead and no government support that they have? How does that work for them?
So, yeah, I was just typing to that one. They, in that specific example, they are an organization which generates 100% of their revenue through the service that they provide. So they provide addiction treatment, and people pay for that addiction treatment, and that payment generates 100% of their revenue. They operate like a business. They just happen to be a non-profit business. So they were forced to pause their activities due to COVID, due to public health restrictions. Now that the economy is opening up, they can resume those activities, and they can repay the loan slowly over the course of 5 years based on the income that their activity generates. We also have more conventional nonprofits that we lend to, and they have government income, or they have philanthropic income, or they have, we even have nonprofits who are generating new ways of making money, and we support that sort of innovation in the nonprofit environment as well.
Great, thank you for that. Another question. What kinds of information do you require for a loan application? What does that process look like and feel like for a prospective borrower?
So for a business loan, the way it actually works is small businesses actually don't submit the documentation themselves. They take an advisor, a small business advisor. Israel has its network of small business advisors provided by the government, or they can take a private one if they want. And that way they have someone who knows how to work with the banks, who knows how to get the paperwork and get the organized financial statements and submit it in a way that we can work with it. Because the guy who makes your pizza or your falafel, that's his skill. His or her skill is to make the pizza and the falafel. It's not necessarily to prepare documentation for a business loan. So that's how that works. The documentation they have to submit is fairly basic. There is a credit check just to check that there is no restriction or sanction on their bank account, that there are no open claims against them in the small claims court, that there is no open criminal activity or something like that, a basic credit check. And then it's a case of what is their current level of debt, what is their current level of income, and just the normal regular underwriting that you would expect, albeit with a more social focus. Because we're a non-profit and because we only have to check that they will be able to repay the loan, we don't have to be able to make money on the loan. We can apply that mission into the way that we underwrite, and over the course of 30 years, that's proven itself with that default rate of under 1%, and that ability to control risk in an appropriate way.
Thank you for that, David. So I think we've come to the end of our questions. So I think we'll turn it to our final slide here and wrap this up. Great. So we come to the close and the important questions about how you can get involved. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is about lending capital from your DAF or supporting foundation to the Ogen Israel Social Loan Program. Minimum investment of $1,000 for 5 years. So of course, this means that during the 5-year term, that money would not be available for grant making or any other purpose. So you have to be obviously really sure that you don't need it in your DAF or won't need it in the next 5 years. This is a below market rate return. So I want to emphasize this is not about making money. We're hoping it to be somewhere around 75 basis points or 0.75 percentage point, which will be paid annually back into the DAF. The idea here is that it is a loan. There's a transaction here. We will earn some interest, but it's really about the impact. One would do this not to make money, but to drive impact in low-income communities who need this access to capital more than ever now. We're looking to raise $1 million, as I mentioned, pooled from across as many DAFs and supporting foundations as we can find who are interested in joining in. So a next step would be you can have a conversation with your philanthropy advisor. You could email us at philanthropy@sfjcf.org, or you could visit our new community impact lending microsite at impactlending.jewishfed.org. There you will see more information about Ogen, more information about our overall impact lending program, and you'll be able to click through to complete an interest form. And with that interest form, we will know to reach out to you and have further conversation about how to complete this transaction. So once again, I would love to thank all of our presenters, all of our audience members here. It's really been exciting to hear more about Ogen from our partners and learn how we together can pool money and have an impact in Israel. Thank you so much for your interest and your support, and I wish you all well.